Welcome to CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with investingnews.com. I'm speaking with Richard Allman, CEO and Executive Director of Australia-based Cleo Diagnostics. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Marie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Let's start our conversation with just you providing an overview of Cleo Diagnostics and your unique value proposition.
So Cleo Diagnostics is a relatively new company. We listed on the ASX just last August, and we are bringing to market a portfolio of products to address a very problematic clinical need. And that is a simple blood test for the accurate and early detection of ovarian cancer. Now, this is a very nasty disease, and there are no real existing screening tests for ovarian cancer, no real diagnostics that perform very well. So it means that the addressable market for such a product is extremely large. And the technology that we are utilizing is supported by gold standard clinical evidence. The technology originally came from a research program at the Hudson Institute of Medical Research here in Melbourne, which has been running for over 10 years, headed by our chief scientist, Dr. Andrew Stevens. The product is supported by an extremely robust intellectual property position. We have granted patents both here in Australia and in the USA, and shortly to be granted in Europe, supporting the product. But I think most importantly, from an investment perspective, one of the strengths of the company is that we've invested a lot of time and effort building the commercialization strategy and the subsequent clinical implementation strategy. And it's very common for diagnostic companies to think that once they've achieved regulatory approval, then they've got instant sales. And it's not true, of course. So we've put a lot of effort into building the platform that will allow us to achieve those sales fairly early on in the lifetime of the company.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more, I guess. So the screening that you've developed for ovarian cancer could be a game changer for women's health. Could you sort of explain why that is and why it's important for this space?
Absolutely. Now, ovarian cancer is a very nasty disease, very insidious, very difficult to diagnose. Quite often, a patient will not have any symptoms until the disease is very advanced. And the result of that is that most cases of ovarian cancer are detected very late, stage 4, by and large. And the key outcome from that, of course, is that the 5-year survival for ovarian cancer is somewhat under 50%. Now, that doesn't mean that 50% of patients will survive 5 years. That's just your likelihood of living for 5 years or more. The actual outcomes are much worse than that. And the reason behind that is all about early detection. Now, ovarian cancer, like most solid tumors, can be very successfully treated with surgery if it's caught early. The success rate for surgery for stage 1 ovarian cancer is over 90%. And one of the things that we are very excited about in Cleo is that our prototype test data for early stage cancer is extremely promising. And we are hoping that this technology will be a game changer for women.
So what makes this technology unique in the market? And could you talk about you've done some clinical studies on it and what some of the highlights from the results of those?
I can indeed. Let me just tell you a little bit about the existing gold standard methods for diagnosing ovarian cancer first, because this is important when we're comparing Cleo's products. There is an existing biomarker in the marketplace called CA125, and this only has an accuracy of about 50%. So no better than tossing a coin, whether you have the disease or not. The standard of care is probably ultrasound, but even the combination of ultrasound with CA125 provides incorrect results about 20% of the time. So a lot of the early clinical studies that we've done with Cleo's technology has been evaluating how well our biomarker panel performs in comparison to those existing gold standards. And Our prototype test currently has a sensitivity and specificity of a little over 95%, which is significantly higher than anything else that's in the marketplace at the moment. It has an accuracy for detecting early stage cancer in excess of 80%. And it's those combinations of figures, which is driving our excitement and pushing us to bring this to market as quick as possible.
So your path to commercialization, like where's the technology at right now, and what's the path to commercialization?
So we've developed a 3-phase commercialization strategy, so that we'll be essentially bringing forward 3 different products, but all based on the same underlying technology. And the reason for that really is that it allows us to bring the product to market much quicker. Now, that first product will be something we call a pre-surgical triage test. And that test is designed to identify whether a lady with symptoms has got ovarian cancer or whether she's got some sort of benign ovarian disease like an ovarian cyst. Now, the reason that is so important is that if the lady does have ovarian cancer, then their chances of having a good outcome is much better if they are assigned to a surgical oncologist straight away. Now, at the moment, that doesn't necessarily happen. A lot of ovarian cancers are passed to general surgeons, and the outcome is significantly worse for those patients. Now, the flip side of the coin, of course, is if a lady has benign disease, they can be assigned a general surgeon, or they may not need surgery at all. Because at the moment, there's no way of diagnosing ovarian cancer pre-surgically. A definitive diagnosis is only made after surgery. So what that means is if you don't have ovarian cancer, you've actually had your ovaries removed to find that out, and you can't simply put them back again. So this type of test has a significant clinical benefit to patients. Now, the second product that we'll be bringing to market is a recurrence test. And that's designed for use in patients who've had that initial surgery and whether their cancer is recurring or not. Now, it's the unfortunate reality at the moment that most patients with ovarian cancer will recur within 18 months after having that initial surgery. So this type of test, if we can identify that recurrence earlier, it's not about generating cures with this type of test, unfortunately, but it does allow doctors to offer a second-line treatment much earlier and improve their quality of life. Now, the third test that we're bringing to market is what we call the Holy Grail in ovarian cancer, and that's a general screening test for the general population, perhaps to be offered at the same time as mammographic screening for breast cancer, for example. It'd be a simple blood test to identify very early on whether you have ovarian cancer or not. Now, that is a significant medical breakthrough if we can bring that to market, because there is no such existing screening test for ovarian cancer at the moment. And the key thing which allows us to envisage that we can do that is the ability of our technology to detect early stage cancer.
No. So, what are the plans for which market to launch this? Are you launching to the U.S. market when it's available, and what's the progress on that? And also, could you talk about some of the upcoming catalysts for this?
Absolutely. So we have a very strong strategic plan in place, and we will be launching that triage test in the USA first. The reason being is that there are existing commercial tests for ovarian cancer on market in the USA which have FDA approval. Now, that means that we can submit Cleo's test for FDA approval in a very short time frame. We are aiming to do that in approximately 24 months' time. And because we are benchmarking Cleo's technology against an existing test, it means that the clinical trial requirements are actually quite small. And we do not have to generate an extremely large clinical trial. It's only about 500 patients. And it's a simple benchmarking exercise of Cleo's technology against those existing tests. Now, we already know that Cleo's performance is extremely good and significantly better than those existing tests. So we are very optimistic that that FDA approval process will be quite short. We're estimating about 60 days after submission of our FDA package. The strategy after that, of course, is to take the product to Europe and to Australia. And the strategy in both jurisdictions is that we'll utilize that FDA application and put forward a application to both Europe and the TGA, who will conduct something called a conformity assessment to see whether the package that we put forward to the FDA meets their requirements. And it's not quite a rubber stamping exercise, but it's not far off if we get that paperwork initially with the FDA correct. In terms of catalysts, a lot of these catalysts that we'll be announcing over the next 24 months are really related to that project management plan over the next 24 months. And they will include things like the manufacturing process. We are speaking to a number of potential manufacturers for the kit at the moment. And that will be announced to the market quite soon, I would think. We'll also be commencing the clinical studies that we need for that FDA application within the coming weeks and months. And the other catalysts that we'll be announcing to the market over the next 24 months are essentially tick boxes on that project management plan. And providing we execute our jobs in a timely manner, that FDA package will be submitted in approximately 24 months' time. Now, clearly, the most important catalyst that we'll be announcing to the market will be that FDA application. And it's such an important announcement for the company because we are putting steps in place at the moment so that we can start implementing that initial test in the clinics as soon as possible after that FDA approval. And as I mentioned earlier on, this is something which I think that a lot of diagnostic companies don't think of until after they've got their reg approval. And if they don't think of these things, they often have this dead space after FDA approval where they don't get any sales. So one of the things that we are working very hard on at the moment to address that and ensure that we get sales after the reg approval is that we're putting in a number of building blocks for the company to make sure that we've got early adopters in the clinics ready to go straight away. And perhaps two of the things that I'll just mention very briefly is about external collaborators and key opinion leaders who'll be working with the company. We will be establishing two very large international research collaborations with a couple of very famous international cancer research organizations, one in the USA, one in Europe in the near future. And we are supporting the products with a very robust publication strategy. And I'm talking here about scientific and medical publications in the medical literature. Now, the reason these publications are so important is that they essentially are the key marketing collateral for Cleo very early on in our commercialization process. They tell the doctors how well Cleo's technology is performing. But they also allow us to open discussions with the private health insurers, particularly in the USA, because this provides evidence to those companies whether they should reimburse Cleo's tests or not. And the third place those publications are useful is because they allow us to make a case to get into the clinical guidelines, not just in the USA, but here in Australia and in Europe as well. Now, if Cleo's tests are in those medical guidelines, that provides a very strong drive for clinicians to start using Cleo's tests.
Sounds like a important part of that strategy. So when you're speaking to investors right now, what do you tell them if they ask you why is now the good time to get involved with Cleo Diagnostics? What makes you a compelling investment opportunity?
I think the key to this, and I'm going to go back to our very robust project management plan, because we released our first clinical validation data just a few months ago in October. In the next week or so, we will be announcing our first clinical utility data. And what I mean by clinical utility data is how well Cleo's test works in the clinic for providing useful clinical information to the doctor. And that first clinical utility data will be explaining to doctors how well Cleo's technology works over and above the existing biomarker CA125. And that initial clinical utility data tells us that Cleo's technology correctly identified most of the cancer cases that were missed by that existing test, CA125. Extremely important data for the clinician to see. Now, to answer your question in more detail about why people should invest in Cleo at the moment, I think the importance of these announcements that we're putting out at the moment and in the coming 6 to 12 months is to show the market and give them confidence that we are executing on our project management plan. One of the things that we were very conscious of when we were putting these strategic plans in place for the company is that we didn't want to be a black box company and not release information to the market until we've got reg approval. Essentially, we will be updating the market as we tick off each of these project management milestones. And I think that's very important for a biotech company. It's quite often, in my experience, that we see other biotechs in the space that don't release information on a regular basis, and it doesn't help investors to have confidence. And I think that's something we are very conscious of. And we are not an R&D company. We are a commercialization company aiming to generate revenue at a very early stage in the lifetime of the company. And I think it's very important that we have these catalysts on our project management plan and we tick them off over the next 12 months.
Certainly a technology that I think we, something that we need, especially for improving women's health. Thanks, Richard, for sharing your company insights today, and good luck to all your endeavors this year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And thanks, everyone, for watching. Join us again next time for another engaging conversation on CEO Insights. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future updates and interviews. See you next time.